Today's video is sponsored by Stamps.com. If you run a small business, then you know that every penny counts, especially in today's economy. And that's why I always recommend Stamps.com, the 24/7 online post office that's dedicated to saving you money, time, and stress. Stamps.com lets you print your own official postage and shipping labels in seconds, so you can skip the trip to the post office and keep more money in your pocket. That's official postage for any letter or any package, anywhere you want to send it. Whether you're running a small office, an online shop, or a huge shipping warehouse, Stamps is a real game changer. Their software lets you access all the post office and UPS shipping services you need, and automatically selects the best USPS delivery option based on price, package size, weight, and required delivery date. I love using Stamps.com for my business because of the amazing savings I can make. Their service gives you access to exclusive discounts on UPS and USPS services all year round that you won't find anywhere else. We're talking up to 30% off USPS rates and 86% off UPS. Keep more money in your pocket by heading over to stamps.com/lazymasquerade. Sign up for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts, just hassle-free postage on demand. Again, go to stamps.com/lazymasquerade and take advantage of that 4-week trial, free postage, and digital scale. Raymond Koh was a Christian pastor who lived and worked in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Known for his good deeds, his tireless work to help the less fortunate, and for generally being an all-round nice guy, one wouldn't expect him to have many enemies. But, in reality, Raymond had a target on his back, one put on him by some very powerful people. And on February 13th, 2017, he fell victim to a plot that you'd only expect to see in an action movie, and not in real life. Had it not all been captured on CCTV, we likely wouldn't even know about it. That afternoon, Raymond was on his way to deliver some food to a friend's house. His wife, Susanna, was originally meant to make this delivery, but since she was particularly busy that day, Raymond offered to lend a hand himself. He set off from his home in the wealthy suburb of Petaling Jaya. While en route, 3 black SUVs suddenly surrounded Raymond's vehicle and forced him to pull over. At least 8 men got out of these SUVs, some of them armed. Whoever they were, they had come to capture Raymond. An unknown accomplice in a white sedan appears to film the entire incident. Due to the camera's limited field of view and the fact that there are trees in the way, it's quite difficult to make out what exactly happened, but it's clear that Raymond struggled with his attackers. During the struggle, his car jerked forward, crashing into the back of the head SUV. Raymond was then forced into the back of one of these SUVs against his will. Behind them, we can see that 2 men on motorbikes and an unknown number of men in a second white sedan were also part of the abduction convoy. Their job was to control the scene by diverting traffic and threatening any potential witnesses to stay back. When this hatchback unwittingly drove too close to the incident, a hooded member of the snatch squad seemingly aims a weapon at the driver, forcing him or her to reverse. One of the motorbikes ensures that they keep a good distance. This whole incident took place in only 40 seconds, and ends with the convoy driving off, taking Raymond and his vehicle with them. Broken glass and Raymond's front license plate were later discovered at the scene, but Raymond Koh himself hasn't been seen or heard from since. To this day, his whereabouts and well-being remain unknown, as do the identities of all of the members of the snatch squad who took him. But that's not to say that there aren't some very compelling theories as to who these guys were and why they did what they did. As mentioned, Raymond was a Christian pastor, and a very prominent one within his community at that. He ran a non-governmental organisation that actively helped to improve the lives of the less fortunate, particularly single mothers and children, recovering addicts, and those affected with HIV. It might surprise you to hear that his community work had earned him some powerful enemies. Malaysia is a predominantly Muslim country, and in most parts of the nation, it's extremely illegal to try and convert someone away from the Islamic faith. 6 years before this incident took place, Raymond had been accused of proselytizing, with some people viewing his activism as a way for him to convert people to Christianity. As a warning, Raymond was anonymously sent a box which contained 2 bullets and a note threatening his life. Many have speculated that the reason behind Raymond's disappearance was his activism. His social and charity work had angered some people in the government. But what evidence do we have that officials were responsible for this? Well, there were at least 15 men in the snatch squad total, so this obviously hadn't been the result of some personal squabble. On top of that, these men had clearly been surveilling his home and were prepared to strike at a moment's notice. Given how well coordinated this job was, it's obvious that the snatch squad were professionals. These men were trained hunters, mercenaries, perhaps even state agents. Indeed, the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia independently concluded that Raymond's captors weren't just pros, but were members of the special branch of the Royal Malaysian Police Force. In response to the public and international outrage, the Malaysian government created a special task force specifically to investigate Raymond Koh's disappearance. Their findings have never been made public. Unfortunately, Raymond is just one in a long line of missing activists in Malaysia. Just 3 months before this incident, 3 other people named Amri Shemat, Joshua Hilmi, and Ruth Setepu also disappeared under similar circumstances. It's not known whether they're all buried deep in the earth somewhere, or locked up in a secret location. But one thing is all too clear: that there's something very dodgy going on in Malaysia. Ask any of her friends or family, and they'd tell you that Elizabeth Barraza was a kind-hearted and loving soul. Her self-confessed nerd, Elizabeth loved comic books and science fiction, and more than anything, enjoyed making costumes of her favourite sci-fi characters. She even met her husband, Sergio Barraza, during a Comic-Con event. They were both avid fans of Star Wars and Harry Potter, and often cosplayed at conventions and theme parks together. The couple were members of the 501st Legion, a global group of Star Wars fans who visit children's hospitals dressed as stormtroopers to help cheer up the patients and lift their young spirits. Elizabeth and Sergio often went to their local hospital, wearing costumes that Liz herself had made. In January of 2019, the couple were preparing to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, and such a monumental occasion called for something special. Elizabeth had planned a fun-filled weekend at Universal Studios Orlando, where the pair of Potterheads could immerse themselves in the magic of the Harry Potter world inside. In order to help pay for the trip, she decided to hold a garage sale outside their home in Tomball, Texas, a safe community where they one day hoped to raise some children. Elizabeth advertised the sale on Facebook the night before and expected a decent turnout. On the morning of January 25th, Elizabeth awoke before sunrise to set up her sale. At 6:48 AM, Sergio left for work while Liz continued to arrange the items that she planned to sell that day. They were both completely unaware that someone was watching them. At 6:52 AM, 4 minutes after Sergio departed for work, a neighbour's surveillance camera caught a black Nissan Frontier pull up in front of Elizabeth's home. The footage shows what appears to be a woman with long hair exit the vehicle and quickly approach the Barraza household. Elizabeth seemingly freezes at the sight of this woman and visibly takes a step back. The two of them have a brief exchange that lasts for only 8 seconds, after which this unknown woman raises a firearm and shoots Elizabeth 3 times at point-blank range, hitting her in the chest before standing over her fallen body and firing one final shot into her head. The woman then quickly retreats back to her vehicle and drives off without taking any of the valuables or money from Liz's cash box. Elizabeth's own Ring doorbell camera also recorded the incident, and although we can't actually see what took place, we can hear the entire encounter, gunshots and all. Unfortunately, the audio is muffled, and it's difficult to make out precisely what Elizabeth and the perp said to one another. One thing that most people agree they can hear, though, is Liz saying "good morning" as the woman approaches her, and, judging by her tone of voice, it doesn't sound like she recognized her killer. After hearing the 4 shots ring out, Elizabeth's neighbors immediately called the authorities. None of them were able to get a good look at the shooter's face, nor had any of them seen the Nissan Frontier in the area before. An ambulance arrived and swiftly took the mortally wounded Elizabeth to the hospital where she frequently volunteered. Tragically, she passed away the following day. She was just 29 years old. Even in death, Elizabeth continued to do good. As a registered donor, her heart, liver, kidneys and corneas were used to save and improve the lives of 4 other people. So, who killed Elizabeth Barraza? Unfortunately, we still don't know. In the wake of the incident, Sergio was of course questioned, but was almost immediately ruled out as a suspect. There's absolutely zero evidence that he was involved in his wife's murder, nor is there any indication that one of her friends or co-workers were responsible. There's no evidence of any secret affairs, or infighting, or jealousy, or anything like that. As far as anyone knows, Liz didn't have any enemies to speak of, and everyone who knew her only had kind words to say about her. Although the case hasn't seen too many notable developments, investigators have been able to uncover a few chilling pieces of evidence. Firstly, there were no shell casings at the scene, suggesting that the killer used a revolver. They also learned that the killer actually returned to the scene just 2 minutes after shooting Elizabeth. Their reappearance was captured on the same surveillance camera. It's speculated that they came back to double-check Elizabeth was dead. That same Nissan Frontier was also captured on a surveillance camera, canvassing the neighborhood just 1 day before the incident. That rules out the possibility that this was just a random robbery gone wrong. Elizabeth had been intentionally targeted. The manner of her execution also suggests that this was something personal. Since Liz didn't seem to immediately recognize her slayer, it's possible that this was a hired hit. Did somebody hold a grudge against her that not even her closest friends and relatives knew about? A grudge strong enough that somebody hired a hitwoman to kill her? To muddy the waters even further, detectives aren't even 100% certain that the perp in this footage is a female, and they haven't ruled out the possibility that it was a male disguising his identity with a wig and costume. Some have noted that the white robe and tall white boots are reminiscent of the Princess Leia outfit. Could this have been a fellow cosplayer? Someone Elizabeth had met before and was friends with on Facebook? That would explain how they knew that she'd be alone in her driveway that morning, setting up her sail, and the costume would explain why Elizabeth didn't initially recognize them. But what that doesn't explain is why nobody in Liz's life can point a finger at any potential suspects. Surely somebody would know if she had a feud with a fellow member of the 501st Legion or some other cosplayer in her social circle. But nobody can. And there aren't any text or email messages suggesting that she had problems with anyone. As it stands, Elizabeth's family continue to appeal for information and desperately hope that whoever killed her will face justice in the near future. Though they and the investigators are still stumped when it comes to the question, why would anyone want Elizabeth Barraza dead? Despite there being a substantial reward of $50,000 for any information pertaining to her case, the authorities are yet to uncover any substantial leads. Barbara Gustern was an accomplished singing and vocal coach living in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood. During her long and illustrious career, she had worked with such stars as Blondie's Debbie Harry, as well as countless Broadway performers. At the age of 87, Barbara was far from retired and was still training and supporting plenty of students, as well as regularly meeting with friends and helping out at her local church's soup kitchen. Despite her advanced age, she still had a teenage energy, as one friend put it, and it was clear to everyone who knew her that Barbara had a real zest for life and for her community, and planned to keep on working, socializing, and volunteering for years to come. On March 10th, 2022, she was actually on her way to Joe's pub to see a student perform, something she often did to show support. Unfortunately, she wouldn't make it to her destination. At 8:30 p.m, just as Barbara stepped out of her building on West 28th Street and 8th Avenue, another, much younger woman suddenly approached her from the other side of the street, called her a bitch, and, in a completely random and unprovoked act of violence, forcefully shoved her to the ground before casually strolling off into the night. Barbara's head slammed into the hard concrete pavement, and she suffered catastrophic trauma to the left side of her brain. A young man found her on the ground and helped her into her building's lobby, where two of her friends happened to be waiting. When paramedics arrived, Barbara was still conscious and was able to tell them that she had been attacked by a red-haired woman in her 30s whom she had never met before. Shortly after relaying that information, her condition deteriorated and she lost consciousness. Tragically, Barbara would never wake up from her coma. 5 days later, she passed away with her grandson by her side, holding her hand. Soon after the incident, authorities released these images of the suspect, who was caught on multiple surveillance cameras leaving the scene. Just as Barbara had said, she was indeed a woman with red hair. The police announced to the public that Barbara had been the victim of a homicide, and these images of the perp were widely circulated. No doubt realizing the dire situation she was in, this woman, now identified as 26-year-old Lauren Pacienza, handed herself in to the police on March 22nd. Pacienza has since been charged with manslaughter, and although she's yet to stand trial for Barbara's death, the police have revealed some truly disturbing information about her actions after the incident. Just 6 minutes after pushing Barbara over, Pacienza returned to the scene and watched as the ambulance took her away. She then removed all of her social media posts and photos from the web and hid out at her parents' home for almost 2 weeks. 2 of her friends called in a tip that she was hiding there, but when officers arrived, her father said that she wasn't in and that they couldn't come inside to search the house. The following day, Pacienza turned herself in. Why Pacienza fatally shoved a complete stranger to her death remains unclear. Perhaps we'll find out during her trial, but the fact that people like her actually exist is enough to make your blood boil. Maria Glikina was a 19-year-old university student from Russia who had a passion for photography and art. She lived with her parents in Nizhny Novgorod, the 6th largest city in the country, and a relatively safe one compared to its big brothers Moscow and St. Petersburg. But that doesn't mean it's devoid of crime. On the night of November 8th, 2014, Maria had plans to meet with her friend, Irina Ivanenko. It's unclear where exactly Maria was before she set off to Irina's house on Timria-Seva Street, but at 10 p.m, the two had a phone conversation in which Maria said that she was on her way and that she was traveling by foot. Irina believed that Maria was walking with her boyfriend, Nikita, but in actuality, she was making the journey by herself. At 10:20 p.m, Maria called Irina again and told her that she was on Menina Street, about 3.2 kilometers from Irina's house, or about a 40-minute walk. 42 minutes later, at 11:02 p.m, Irina received a text from Maria saying that she was on Belinskogo Street and that she'd be at her house in about 10 to 15 minutes. Irina waited patiently, but after 20 minutes had passed, she gave Maria another call to see where she was. Strangely, Maria answered the phone, told Irina, "Sorry, I can't talk right now. I'll call you later," and then abruptly hung up the phone without elaborating further. According to Irina, it sounded as if Maria was out of breath. Worried, Irina called her back again to see what was wrong. Maria answered, simply said, "I'm not coming," and hung up. Again, Irina tried to call her back, but Maria had already switched off her phone. That was the last time anyone heard from Maria Glikina. She never made it back to her family home that night. After hanging up on Irina, nobody was able to contact her. She had fallen off the face of the earth, and, given the worrying nature of her final call, everyone feared the worst. On the morning of November 9th, 77 local volunteers scoured the streets for Maria, searching high and low for the missing student. Unfortunately, this search wouldn't have a happy conclusion. On the evening of November 10th, her body was discovered in the basement of an old, abandoned house. Her hands and feet had been bound together, and she was lying in the fetal position. The only clothes she was wearing were a scarf and a blouse. Her other garments had been taken. Initially, the police had been reluctant to help search for the missing girl, but now that her remains had been uncovered, they finally began to take action. After examining Maria's body, the coroner determined that she had been beaten, raped, and ultimately asphyxiated, though strangely, there were no marks around her neck. DNA samples were recovered at the scene, though they didn't match with anyone on the forensic database. To begin with, the investigators tried to claim that Maria had accidentally been hit by a car, and that the driver had simply dumped her body in the shack to avoid repercussions. Given that she was tied up and had been violated, nobody was buying that. After mounting public pressure, they began tracking Maria's movements on the night she disappeared using city surveillance footage. This turned up some very valuable and very eerie evidence. On November 8th, at 11:05 p.m, Maria was caught on CCTV at an intersection approximately 5 or 6 minutes from Belenskogo Street, heading in the opposite direction of Irina's house. But that's not the only thing that the camera picked up. Just 30 seconds later, it also captured these images of a bald-headed man following Maria. Maria's body was discovered just 300 meters from where this footage was recorded. As such, it's highly suspected that the man in this image is the one responsible for taking her life. Given the time frame, it seems likely that Maria had already been cornered by her killer when she spoke with Irina on the phone, and that she had probably been instructed not to cry for help and to just hang up. The fact that she was heading in a different direction, away from Irina's house, also suggests that she knew she was being followed. According to Maria's cell phone data, she was moving extremely quickly shortly after this final sighting, too fast for any human to move on foot. It's believed that she must have been captured, forced into a vehicle, and murdered in a different location, before being dumped in the abandoned house close to where she was last seen. In the early hours of November 9th, surveillance cameras near the abandoned house captured this footage of a man who looks remarkably similar to the one following Maria. These images may show the man leaving the scene after having dumped Maria's body in the shack. As some netizens have noted, the man bears a striking resemblance to Vitaly Kochuaque, a murderer who was apprehended in 2018 after stabbing an 11-year-old girl in the heart and, miraculously, failing to kill her. Kochuaque had been living in Nizhny Novgorod at the time Maria was slain, and had a history of targeting women. However, His DNA wasn't a match with that found at the scene, and he's not believed to have been involved in Maria's case. As it stands, the suspect in this image remains unidentified, and until he's brought to justice, it's possible that he will strike again, if he hasn't done so already. Thank you very much for listening. Before this video ends, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. Punished Kratos, Nephus 1988, Lydia Glassley, That One Guy Thomas, Nadine, Jessie Jug, Alex Greensall, Alicia Jagels, Anya Yekaterina Faustov, asiamina, Azrael Warakai, Beatrice Matarazzo, Charlie Lackey, Chief Cochuaque, Colin Monsma, Connor Lotham, Craig Poliner, Crawford K. MacDonald, Expand Dong, Gina Valera, Grace Archie, Infamous-senpapi, Joshua Quintero, Larry Mattingly, Leonardo Martinez, M. May H., Mackenzie Griffin, Myra Lancaster, Monica Mendoza, Natalie Escobedo, Peter Loggerach, Philip Wester, Procupidine Natter, Taylor&Monica Gruenk, The Only Dorita, Zane, Mrs. Yvonne Rankin, The Deck of Cards, and TNS Mum. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. It really helps the channel out. Be sure to smash that like button or I'll smash you, and you'll all be hearing from me again very soon. Until then, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.